Thanks for joining us today. I got to interview Brady McDonald from BK Real Estate, and we had a really good conversation. So Brady went from working with Hydro One as an arborist, or as I guess he trained people to climb trees and do all sorts of stuff for Hydro One, to becoming a full-time real estate investor. And they're now at 96 properties as of the date of recording, him and his wife, Kristy. So they're a good team. One of the really cool things about Brady and Kristy is all the systems they've developed to allow them to scale to that size. So if you're at 10 properties or 5 properties or 25 properties, wherever you're at, you can learn from their systems to be able to scale to a larger portfolio, basically. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. I hope you'll enjoy the show. And as always, if you know anyone looking to invest in real estate, Hamilton, St. Catharines, Welland, I'm always happy to work with the people you know. All I ask you to do is reach out to me, George at welloff.ca. Connect me, send me an email with their information, and I'll be happy to follow up. And like I said, I hope you'll enjoy the show. Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm here today with Brady McDonald, who is one half of the Kristy and Brady McDonald team. They started BK Real Estate Investing in 2014 when they realized the wealth and freedom that real estate investing can bring. And by mid-2018, they had purchased and renovated over 75 properties, and they pride themselves on creating systems for renovations, co-venture partnerships, property management, and several other things. Brady began as a utility arborist instructor for Hydro One, and he's retired from that since then. And then Kristy began and remains as an accredited real estate appraiser. Today, she owns her own firm. So, Brady, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, George.
Thank you for making the journey down from Barrie.
It was an easy drive today.
Yeah, very good. So I'm glad to have you here. I usually start off by asking you about your childhood. So if you want to just kind of tell me where you grew up and what you remember from your childhood.
Good. Yeah, I don't think I've actually ever been down that road with anybody on the podcast or actually anybody in the real estate world anyway. Yeah. So that's a good question. All right. So yeah, I grew up in Owen Sound. Family. I had 3 kids, or three of us kids. I have a younger brother and an older sister, actually, that both work for us now at our investing company. So I grew up there. Childhood, in my memories, it was like, I don't know, it was a bit of a struggle. Parents divorced when we were kids at like 11. And after that, it was a bit of a shamble for a while. But, growing in small town stuff, there's not a ton of things to do, but, I remember like my first job was, I believe I was 12 or 13 years old. I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my mom worked at a dental clinic around the corner from her house. So I'd be up at 5 o'clock, and I'd shovel 3 blocks of sidewalk and sidewalks going into there to the dental clinic. And I do that every morning at 5 o'clock, and I called it Brady's lawn and snow service. So I'd be writing invoices out, right? And they would, I think the minimum wage back then was like maybe $6.10 or somewhere right around $6 an hour. Yeah. They'd pay me minimum wage, and and that was kind of from that point on. I really honestly had the entrepreneurial bug. I got a job across the street where I'd fill the pop machines, and kind of went. I did that probably for a few years until I think it was 14. I got my first job at Taco Bell.
Oh, wow.
Big upgrade.
Wasn't it better for you to like shovel snow and do lawn care rather than Taco Bell?
I had 100%. I'm sure it was. But you know what? Those lessons early, because of the divorce and just the way that things were, like money was tight. And I remember, playing hockey and lacrosse, there was times where there wasn't money. So I literally paid for all my hockey gear, and I was a goalie at certain times, right? But anyway, it made, gave me some life lessons and some entrepreneurial lessons early.
Very cool. Yeah. So where does that come from? Because there's been a few people that I've interviewed that are very successful today that told me when they were young, they either would mow lawns or they would shovel snow as 12-year-olds, just like yourself. Where did that come from? Why did you do that when you were young?
I think it's maybe like an internal fear of not being able to do what you want, or not being able to play that hockey. So it's like you do whatever you need to do to get what you want. My dad was an entrepreneur himself. He had a painting business. So I saw, that aspect of it. But I honestly think like having that little bit of fear of not knowing, how you're going to get to where you want to go really pushes you to do what you want to do or do what you need to do to get where you want to go.
Right. Okay, so so do you remember approximately how much you were making as a kid doing the shoveling snow and the lawn care or whatever else you were doing?
Yeah, well, I don't remember the amounts of money, but I remember I broke it down to the quarter hour. So you could only imagine if I went out and it took me an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half in the morning because maybe it's snowed 6 inches or maybe it snowed a foot. We get a lot of snow up there, so it'd be 2.5 hours. So 2.5 times $6. Right?
Yeah.
It's like $22?
Yeah.
So it'd be like 22, 75, right? And I would so I record that for 2 weeks, submit my invoice, it might be $110, something like that for a 2-week period.
Not bad.
Yeah.
For a 12-year-old or 13-year-old.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. Okay, so you worked Taco Bell. Then after that, what did you do after Taco Bell?
So after Taco Bell, they opened up a Montana's in Barrie or in Owen Sound. Sorry. So I started there, and then I was playing lacrosse a fair bit. So at this point, I was probably 17, 16 years old. No, it must have been early in that, 15. And then so I finished high school and actually lost my license for impaired. That's probably the first time I've ever told anybody that too. Okay. Whoop-de-doo. So you screw up when you're young, right? So for all those people, if you screwed up, it's okay. You can still, do good things.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm finishing high school and that happened. So, at least it happened at the right time. I had lots of life to fix this problem that I've created. And my parents were like, hey, you're going to school, you got to, get out in the real world, blah, blah, blah. So I was 17. I went to college. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but they said, you know what? Your uncles have done well in forestry. Go to school for forestry. Okay, here we go. So I'm off to school for forestry. So I went to Fleming College. And I was 17 when I did that. So I was living at the residency there. And I got great grades. I didn't have to go a whole lot. This was first year. And I always had this, I had one of my buddies, my best friend's brother. His buddy worked for Hydro One, and it was he drives a brand new truck. He always has a cooler full of beer, right? The things that you care about when you're 17.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I gotta I want to get onto Hydro One, right? So anyway, that was kind of a long-term goal. And in the meantime, we're first year of school. I was looking to get a job in between first and second year, PCO pest control, the Orchid Man. They actually they would put you through a course, a pesticide license course, and give you a license at the end of it, and they would give you a job. So I went through that process. So in between first year, second year, I actually worked in between Sarnia and Owen Sound, spraying cottages for spiders. In the meantime, I met a guy who had a cube van. I'm like, hey, you got a cube van? What do? You must have work for yourself. He's like, actually, I work for Blue Water Power. And I'm like, I want to try to get on to Hydro One. He's like, oh, well, you know what? Where are you staying? I said, I'm staying at the dormancy at the college in Sarnia. And he's like, well, why don't you join me and my family and have dinner with us tonight? Fantastic. So I had dinner with this guy, and it was amazing, right? Him and his family just met me. I was spraying his house for spiders, a rental property, actually. And so he's like, I told him my goals and what I wanted to do. He's like, well, bring me your resume, and I'll, see what I can do. So anyway, probably a week and a half later, I got a phone call. I got a job.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, so I, it was just meeting that right guy, whatever. He took a liking to me. At this point I was 18 years old, but I'm working, I've been away from home basically since I left high school. So, so I got a job with Hydro One, started 2 weeks later. The PCO guy was awesome. Like my boss, he's like, I actually had to start that. It was like a Thursday. I had to start Monday. So like, yep, take the truck, just bring it back to us, the following Friday. And and away we went. So I started as a laborer there, and then got an apprenticeship, utility arborist apprenticeship. I did that for 4 years. And then immediately after the apprenticeship, I became an instructor.
Okay.
Yes.
So what does that mean? What does an instructor do?
So they teach the young guys or the apprentices how to climb rope. They basically, the instructor teaches the 4-year apprenticeship to become a certified utility arborist. So it's an apprenticeship governed by the municipal or the Ministry of Colleges, Trades, and Universities, I think. And so there's a curriculum, right? It's 4 years, lots of testing, lots of content creation. So we, a lot of the stuff a lot of skills actually that have crossed over have come from my career at Hydro One. So I ended up working in a train. We started a training center in Barrie, which is where I lived. A lot of my career was over in Smith Falls, near Ottawa, and throughout Ontario with hydro. But for the last probably 9 years, we were in Barrie with the training center there. So we had all the apprentices come in and out. But yeah, I gained a lot of skills. So the systems and the processes and the like all the the boring stuff that happens behind the scenes in a real, like while you're trying to grow your real estate investing portfolio, those skills and the ideas of processes and systems and being more system dependent than people dependent are because of my career there at Hydro One.
Got it.
So,
and that's something that you're really big on. You guys always, you and Kristy always talk about systems, and you take pride in that. And it's interesting that it came from Hydro One, but it makes sense. So how did you meet Kristy, by the way?
Yeah, so Kristy, so she'll eventually hear this, so I don't know which version, my version or hers.
Just tell your version.
Yeah, no, actually, so I met Kristy, we had mutual friends, and she was, at the time working at the bank, and so we had mutual friends, met at a party, became friends, and then her parents, were into boating.
Okay.
So they had a big boat. It was like a 32-foot boat, and I've never seen this in my life. I'm like, oh my God, these people are millionaires. This is insane, right? This next level of wealth. Like, anyway, so long story short, it was probably we became really close friends. I bought a big boat. Like, I realized, I didn't realize boating was a thing, and then probably 6 months later, I bought a 29-foot boat.
Cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, you set your goal.
Yeah.
Just get your beat on it and get it done.
Yeah.
And then I boated with her and her family for probably 3 years or something like that. And then eventually the opportunity brought us together.
So your interest for boating is what brought you to your wife.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about real estate now. You were with Hydro One, whatnot. How did that transition to becoming a real estate investor happen?
Yeah. So it happened. So initially, while I worked for Hydro One, I also had a side hustle. So I had a town and country tree service is what I called it. But every day after work, so from 5 o'clock at night till dark, I would, in Barrie and in cottage country north of Barrie, I'd go up. I'd have signs all over the trees, and I'd be flying and get these jobs where there was maybe trees overhanging cottages, limbs overhanging cottages, dead trees that needed to be cutting down. So I'd climb up there, cut them down, clean them up, take them away. So that was my tree service. So that again kind of kept on. That was kind of the boat money, the extra 40, 50 grand a year income. That again, it was something different from hydro where I put this effort in, I get paid this amount of money, or I get you get reciprocal value back. So anyway, so I had that tree service for the longest time. But then I think we were looking at kids and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I need to find something more. I was about year 12 in my career at Hydro, and we were looking for something more. We were looking to, get out of the corporate world, work for ourselves. We looked at buying land, developing it into storage units. Looked at buying franchises. We're looking at all different types of options. Because I wanted to quit the tree service, but also wanted to quit my job eventually, right? Create that freedom, that time freedom that real estate investing allows for us. So ultimately, it was we're going to work into this journey and talking, and over probably a year and a half, Kristy and I, it was one Friday. I picked her up. She was a real estate appraiser, so she was doing an inspection at a property, and so she recognized the guy that owns the property, and she said, "Hey, what's going on? I recognize you." He's like, "Yeah, this is my full-time job. I'm a full-time real estate investor." She's like, "Oh, how many properties do you have?" And at the time, he had 44 properties, and she's like, "Holy man!" Like he's like, "Yeah, I bought." He's like, "I bought 8 of those, so 16 units that year, and it was only June." And my wife and Chrissy's like, "Oh my gosh, like my husband would love to talk to you." So anyway, so she finishes her inspection. She comes out. She tells me this. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like this is a thing? How do you do that?" I wrote down 44 times the average at that time was $300,000 was the value of a duplex. So 44 times 300 is X amount of portfolio. If the mortgage pay down on each of those is $6,000, so then add that, right? And then your cash flow and your appreciation. I'm like, this guy's making $1 million a year, like in wealth. And that was when the light went off. So we ended up meeting up with that fella. He took us out for lunch, or maybe we took him, and he was asking us questions like, what are your goals? I'm like, buy one property. He's like, well, how are you going to get your financing? I'm like, the bank. We knew nothing about anything, right?
Yeah.
We did at that point have 2 income properties. One was my primary residence before I met Kristy, and then one she had an income property before we got together.
Okay.
So we had 2 properties. But they were kind of like, we're just kind of accidental landlords. We didn't run it like a business at all, right? It was just, they had them, they kind of worked. Anyway, so that meeting really opened up our eyes that, holy, we know nothing about this. We need to educate ourselves about this. So number one thing, so we started reading all the books, listening to these types of podcasts. So all the Don Campbell books, Ian Zabel for renovations was a great one. Renos to Riches. Listened to all the podcasts, started going to meetups. So there's a great meetup down in Newmarket. We went to that every month, and etc. So our education phase was about a year, and in that year we were also trying to figure out our strategy. So we bought a house actually with Kristy's brother, and we renovated it. I renovated, so I kind of transitioned from the tree service with my extra time into renovations. So at that point, we renovated it into a duplex, refinanced it. When we refinanced it, we got all of our renovation money back, and we got a portion of our down payment. Perfect, like strategy kind of picked, and actually we did. It went fairly successful. So that was kind of the end of that. Was us like, okay, now we got our strategy, we got the education. How do we scale this? So we refinanced 2 of our primary residence in one of those income properties, and that came up with $150,000. And we turned that into 4 properties in 15. And before, so those were all primarily, but yeah, buy them, convert them to duplex or second suites. It was right when second suites came out in Barrie, and then refinance them, and carry on. So we did that 4 times successfully with our own money. And we're like, okay, we've got enough money for 2 more, right? But before we do that, we should start offering our services to joint venture partners. How do you do that? No idea. Read the books, right? It's like starting the anytime you do something new, it's scary, right? But education is a big way to remove that fear and to remove a lot of the risks. So we read the books. I had a mentor, Susan. She's from Barrie. So she was great during this phase where, okay, I understand it, but these are the things that I'm unclear about. So I took her out for coffee or lunch. I can't remember, and I just gave her a list of 5 questions, and she's just like, just answered them. And it was just like, clarity, let's go.
Yeah.
Right. It was just, you need somebody like that to just be able to bounce those few questions off just to make sure that you're on the right page, that you're not missing something, and away we went. So yeah. So then it's just, about 80% of the deals that we do are with joint venture partners, very typical 50-50 JV. They're basically the money partner, for lack of better terms, then we do all the work. Yeah, and so 15, we did, I think 7, 15, 16, I think we did 12, 20, 16, 22. Sorry, I think we did 20 and 12 so 15, 16, we did 20, and 17 in the peak of the market, we did 32. And then I think we did 25 in 18, we had a recount. And then this year, I'm not sure where we are, but we got 4 more to 100.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're saying you did 12, 20, 32, are you talking about conversions, or are you talking about doors that you acquired?
Properties.
That you acquired.
Yeah, purchases. Okay. Yeah. So some of those, like depending on the year, some of those we sold. But again, most of those were 95% of those are second suite conversions. So depending on our cash flow, depending on the market, and depending on the consumer confidence of the investor, basically would kind of determine whether we kept them or not.
Right.
There was times during the last 4 years where investors were like, I don't know if I want to hold, because there's a bit of fear there, right? So they were like, okay, let's just get in, get out. We probably sold. Well, we currently hold probably about 65 to 70 properties.
You're holding 65 to 70 at this time.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were kind of touching on getting rid of some of the properties that you had. Sometimes it was because the partner didn't want it. Were there other reasons that you would get rid of certain properties?
So we'd always go into the joint venture knowing what the intent was, right? So it wasn't like an accident. It wasn't, I want to sell now. It was always, okay, hey, we're going to buy this. Or joint venture A came to us and said, hey, I'm willing, we'd love to partner with you guys, but we want to flip. and there'd be other investors that wanted to hold, right? So depending on what they wanted to do was what we would help determine what we wanted to do. But also, Kristy and I's, eventually our capital went down. So we're like, hey, we're flipping everything. Like 16, we sold 12 out of the 20. Right? Because we spent all of our money on the year prior. And then we made a bunch of money. 2017, we kept them all. Right? So it was more of just a cash flow discussion. Then 18 was, we flipped a bunch then too, but that was because the investors' confidence in what was going on in the market was wavering, right? So that was ultimately what changed people's minds then.
Okay, and were you also flipping, so duplexing then selling?
Yeah.
Well, it was mostly duplex, the strategy.
Yeah, everything was second suite. And the reason why, because, in my opinion, people buy those unemotionally. They buy them based on the numbers, right? And you can really predict the sale value, where personally, I can't predict the sale value of a single family home because that person has to love it, right? And then it depends on who's buying at what time. So that's why we've always stuck to that. So our the results were always super predictable.
Okay, got it. All right, very cool. So you're getting into this. You buy a bunch of properties. You scale up. You go from 12 to 20 to 32, 25. How were you able to do that in such a short period of time?
Yeah, so good question. And so a lot of the scalability, especially with us, has been through a few factors. One is hiring people. Obviously, we can't do that alone. So we do have a large team. And we started building our team from property number 1 in 2015. I hired a contractor, and my rules was that whoever works for us is working for us 40 hours a week minimum. I don't want to play he's juggling too many job sites, and then the project goes from 3 months to 6 months. Well, in my mind, that extra 3 months is $6 to $8 in carrying costs, right? We don't have that in the budget. So set the precedence early. Property number 2, my brother came on board, so he's a project manager. And then basically we just kept on hiring staff along the way. So it was probably about property 7 where we hired somebody in-house in the back office. And again, we kind of test it before we hire somebody full-time to make sure it's sustainable. And what we would do was, at that point, we were hiring a summer student. And so we know she's in university. We got 4 months. How much work do we have? Is this sustainable? So we tested it out. And then once she went back to school, we hired again full time. Yeah, so we hired along the way. We've been up to about the same staff. Right now we have about 15 staff. And that year 32, we might have been 16, 17 with contractors, some subcontractors that would work exclusively for us, not bouncing around projects. So people is a big thing, right? The other thing is making sure that our strategy was recycling capital, right? So when we buy, say, a single family home, let's just use round numbers, like for $80,000 for down payments, and it costs $70,000 for renovation, so it's $150,000 to buy it and renovate it. When we refinance it, we get all of our money back except for maybe $20,000 or $30,000, right? So when you find an investor that has $150,000 and maybe a line of credit for short-term renos, you can turn that $150,000 into 5 properties, right? So that makes it a lot easier when you don't have to spend all your time talking to new investors, explaining your process to new investors, doing a show right? So you're able to scale obviously the number of properties your investors can get, which they obviously love. And your own personal cash flow as well is the same thing, right? If you have $200,000 with that type of recycling of capital, you can buy quite a number of properties.
Right. Over what period of time typically would you say, to turn $150,000 to 5 properties? How long would that usually take?
Yeah. So if they only can do one property at a time, let's say they only have. Maybe they have $150,000 and they got an extra $50 for a line of credit or $100 for a line of credit. You're only going to be doing one property at a time, right? But if you had access to $500,000 and you could do 3 at a time, well, then you could do probably 6 properties in 1 year, right? So we're buying, renovating, and refunding at refinance with about 6 months.
Okay, very cool. You kind of touched on how you ran short of capital at one point because you had invested so much into your business. Is that something, so you flipped to generate some income? Is that something you're still doing today, or are you doing something differently to generate now income?
Yeah. So because the business is so active, it's hard to see, where your actual cash flow is.
Mhm.
I mean, because if we get extra cash flow and all of a sudden there's say 60 grand in the bank, I'm going to do something with it. So you obviously need to live. And so up until now, we've always flipped a couple houses regardless a year, for personal reasons, for personal cash flow. But that is changing. So we've launched a property management company, Live with BK Property Management. So
Okay.
we're doing that. We're servicing landlords and investors all across Simcoe County, and so we did that for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, cash flow. It's another stream of income, which is nice. So you're not completely reliant on the market per se. You're still in the real estate industry, but not reliant as much on the market. So we did it for personal cash flow reasons, but we also did it out of just the pure need for a good property management company in our area. We actually, so Kristy and I, in 2018, we cruised the Bahamas and Florida for about 6 months over the year. Still we bought 20 some odd properties, because of the systems and the processes that we have in place that it kind of does that for you. But so at that point, we actually moved I think there was 12 or 14 properties with a property management company in Barrie. And we thought, okay, that would help lighten the workload on our staff, lighten the workload on Kristy. She does a lot of the back office stuff, deals with it all. She deals with it all. So it lighten the workload, and so within 6 months we had 2 evictions, and our guys went to do maintenance at 2 other units the same week, and there was no tenants there. They're gone. They're just like. There's no tenants. There's no tenants. They call. Is there a vacant unit? Is this supposed to be vacant? It's like no.
Yeah.
So it was a really quick call.
So what do you do in that situation if the person just leaves? You don't have like an N11. You don't have anything signed.
Yeah.
What happens?
You're kind of done. I guess you could probably. Yeah. You know what we did is just you split your losses and you get it filled as soon as possible. So. That old saying, you hire slow and fire fast. So we obviously fired the property manager really quickly and took back control and filled it.
Did you take any measures? Did you document everything, take pictures and say hey, we tried contacting the tenants, this and that, and we couldn't get a hold of them?
Yeah, it was, so at the time we had to kind of, and that's the thing. Yeah. So if let's say technically they moved out, but they kept paying rent.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a 3 or 4 week period where we had to kind of be cautious as to how we were going to advertise. It's what happens if they just moved out? Because there was some junk there and some random stuff, right? So, so then when we went back the following week, and it was actually in the winter, so you could see nobody's shoveling the walkways. The mail hasn't been picked up in probably 3 weeks. So at that point, we just made the decision. Okay, they're gone. They're not coming back. Let's get if we had to go in there, we cleaned out all their garbage and got it rented and kind of.
And that's where BK Property Management came from.
Yeah, Live with BK Property Management. That's honestly just we didn't open it up immediately. We didn't start it immediately. Another friend said, "Oh, why don't you do this?" And you know what? I just eventually it kind of trickled into my brain. I'm like, you know what? I think we should do that. So it took it's a fair bit of work to create the systems and the marketing and figure out, okay, what do we believe in? What is our, why would people, bring their portfolio to us? You determine your values, all these things. It takes to define that stuff. So it took us probably a month and a half, and then we launched probably 3 or 4 months ago. Yeah. So that's another source. That's one of our other sources of income.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So you touched on the systems. We talked about it quite a bit. Can you kind of walk us through certain systems or maybe certain things you can share about your systems?
Yeah, sure. So, again, the systems and the processes that we've created have kind of just come out of pure need, but also came out of more of a way to solve problems. So, as we're going through this transition from, just being a small time landlord to creating a business, I knew, and then also let's just say for an example, I didn't, you start looking at a bunch of properties because that's your goal, and you don't know all the rules in the back of your head about, ceiling heights and room sizes for second suites and, egress windows. And there's a lot of different rules just associated to creating a second suite. So I would just create a form. So when I created the form, okay, these are the things I need to look at when I'm going through a property to potentially purchase it.
Like a checklist.
It's a checklist.
Yeah.
It's okay, room sizes, egress windows.
Yeah.
Do I have ceiling height in the basement? Do I have ceiling height in the staircase? Like these are all issues that can be resolved, but it's going to cost money.
Yeah.
Right. So it helped me make sure that I wasn't missing something in the purchase phase. So that's one example of how this has all come. It's like real life systems that I use personally or our company used to solve problems. And so then, when we started hiring staff and there would be like something missed. Okay, well, if something got missed, there's a reason. And how do we prevent that from happening again? So we'd create a process or checklist to prevent that from happening again, right? So we have systems in place from everything from, not necessarily that I would use them for, say, looking at a property, but somebody else could easily implement them, right? And whether they use that list or can manipulate it into a list that works for their strategy which is the important part. So, yeah, so systems on purchasing, systems for joint ventures, making and collecting documents from the joint venture partner, making sure that you have both your JV agreement, your side agreement signed. Like there's a checklist. Make sure it's signed, because if it's not signed,
sorry, you said JV agreement and
like a side agreement. We do side agreements.
Okay.
That I'll just leave that alone. But it's just a side agreement.
Yeah,
Basically, it goes along with the joint venture agreement.
Okay, perfect.
Make ssure that they're signed. If they're not signed and something happens, well, then the agreement is as good as the piece of paper it's written on. A list of making sure that the utilities and everything, that we have all the account information. So if there's a water tank issue, that we actually have access to solve that problem versus a joint venture partner. So then you're going into renovations, system on ordering renovation material, right? So we have a one order sheet. All of our materials come from a supplier, and we have SKU numbers, right? So again, it's quick, it's easy, it's fast. The materials are consistent, the costs are consistent, etc. And then going into ongoing reporting and how to, calculating all your materials and your list and your expenses while you're doing renovations, etc. Basically, from purchasing and dealing with joint ventures to reporting monthly expenses and dealing with tenant issues, tenant handbooks, like all that stuff's there's documentation there. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So for someone listening to this, they might be overwhelmed with everything that they're hearing. Do you think that somebody should just go out there, make mistakes, try to learn as much as possible and avoid mistakes? But if you make them, then that's fine, because you guys have been through it, people have been through it. So you just got to do it and move forward and create a system after, if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you try to mitigate as much of the risk as you can at the start. Education is the number one way, I feel, to mitigate a lot of the risks. Having a mentor alongside that you can at least bounce the questions off is another one. But then, yeah, like these systems and processes, some of them can, they can mitigate risk, right? I mean, you could totally go through it and do it all yourself. It was easier I wouldn't say it was easy for us, but we had a team of staff helping create this stuff, right? So I mean, if you can like all of our stuff, we're going to actually create a training package, a full online training. What's it called? Just a training course with all of our systems and processes included within it, and teach you how to use it. Like that, I think, is probably very valuable to not have to worry about if stuff's getting missed in the back end. And then you can really focus on what the front end is, which is what everybody likes. We like to buy, we like to negotiate, we like to renovate, but it's all that stuff in the back that can get missed.
And you don't have to start from scratch. If you sign up for this kind of course, you have everything. You'll at least have an understanding of what it takes to mitigate risk.
Yeah, it'll definitely help mitigate the risk. And it's not all, like, some of these things are going to mitigate risk now, as far as, like, say, over rent or under renovating or under evaluating the renovations required. Some of that's going to be able to be through these forms, but also risk later for, to make sure that you do have your documents all in line. That you do have your joint venture agreement signed. The accounting and the accounting and reporting. A lot of the back end stuff is going to mitigate risk of loss and issues down the road as well.
Yeah. So if you're just looking at one property, you just want to be a one property owner, maybe this system isn't completely necessary. But if you want to scale to 100 properties like you guys are doing, then these are the systems that are created for that purpose. Yeah, and beyond.
Yeah, and I would say not even like 100. I'm thinking like 3 to 5. You don't need them all by far. You don't need them all.
Yeah.
But there is certain things like you can have $100,000 loss or a $50,000 loss at one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality, right? So if there's certain tools that work, then absolutely I would try to use them.
Yeah.
It is probably going to be best used for 5 to 10. It's going to be very implementable because a lot of people can get 5 to 10 units, but they work for 100 units.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you're setting yourself up for success in the future.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move on to the next section, is there anything you want to add on this topic or anything else?
Yeah. Well, I guess we are going to be talking about this online training about systems is you can find that at livewithbk.com.
Okay.
Or sorry, learn. Just brand new. It's brand new. What is it called? But yeah, so if you go to www.learnwithbk.com.
Okay.
So learnwithbk.com.
Yeah.
That's where the training and all the information will be on.
Okay. And we were kind of discussing that a little bit before we started recording. So you're going to be sharing your systems, your procedures. You also said you're going to share some documents and stuff like that.
Yeah. So all the documents and systems and procedures that we use and we have implemented and since day one will be on this training course. So it is going to be online based. I think there will be a few opportunities to do it in person and then have access to online. But we're going to, talk about all the different systems and processes, really break them down and have downloadable forms. So all the forms that we've created, you guys will have in your for your access. Then we're going to work through how to actually implement them.
Okay. Can you talk about some of the forms that you'll be sharing with the people that sign up?
Yep. So, for example, like if you're walking through a property and you want, if you're to convert it to a duplex, these are the things, right, to look for, just like inspection form or walkthrough forms. For duplex, triplex, there'll be forms. We'll go through again the document that I was saying about ordering materials, say from Home Depot or Lowe's or your supplier. You'll have that in that system of how to, just filling it out, of ordering and how do you order it, like send it, and then the types of things that you can ask for in back from, say, your supplier. Move-in inspection forms, right? So you got a tenant that's moving in. How do you protect both yourself and the tenant to make sure, okay, if just that we acknowledge that this is the condition of the unit. We also, for tenant placement, we have obviously different like questionnaire forms where we'll somewhat interview them on the phone before we even book a viewing. What questions do we ask? Why do we ask them? Right? And then how do we determine whether or not that we say schedule a viewing? Forms on if we're still talking about management, bi-yearly inspection forms, right? Again, protects your butt. You get check your smoke detectors. A long list of stuff. Yeah. But those inspections prevent a lot of maintenance down the road. But they also acknowledge issues, maybe tenant issues, throughout the year, right? So it gets you in there, gives you a good snap look of the units, etc. There's probably a pile of other things. Oh, so like just recording renovation material. Okay, how do we track renovation material and how do we report on it at the end, like a summary report on the different breakdown of different types of expenses? How do we track income and expenses on a property, period, right? How do we track tenant contact information? Right. Like you can have a property management software, but if you only have 1 to 10 properties, you likely don't, right? So and you don't need it necessarily, but we can give there's gonna be documents and forms on all types. Cool.
So it's basically like a real estate investor toolkit.
It's absolutely
complete toolkit.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Just very quickly, you touched on your biannual property visits.
Yep.
Or walkthroughs. Can you kind of just walk us through what you look for specifically? I don't know if you have it all on the top of your head, but if you can just kind of share it with us.
Yeah, so so we also have a form for that. Yeah. Again, so you purposely are going through the entire unit. Yeah. So we're gonna, let's just say you walk into the door on the outside of the house, you're gonna look at the windows. If they're wood windows, do they need painting? Are the decks or the steps in good order walking up to the house? Are there mailboxes? Obviously, is there a lockbox there? Is the lockbox code right? Because again, stuff happens. So you walk in the house. Do the hinges on the doors actually operate? What's the general condition of the paint? Is there damage from dogs and pets? Is there So then if you go into the kitchen, you're looking underneath the kitchen sink, you're looking for loose faucets, you're looking for mold in the kitchens. You're making sure the door handles on the kitchens and the hinges on the kitchen cabinets are all functioning properly. And then, the smoke detectors, you're verifying that they work, verifying that the checking the serial numbers on them, right? And that's another form that the tenants get actually signed is the
serial numbers on the smoke detectors.
Yeah,
okay.
To make sure that the why do we do that? We do record the serial numbers on them, but I forget why. I guess I'm not sure. Maybe why. Anyway, what else? Yeah, so verify all the smoke detectors are in place and they actually work. That's common. The tenants with the new smoke detectors, they'll pull them down. Bathrooms, caulking. Right, stuff that's going to affect things that you can't see. So caulking around the bathtubs, again, leaks, faucets, checking for mold around the baseboards. Sometimes in basements, if they don't have a dehumidifier, then you're going to create condensation in the basement during summer months. So that can be an issue. It's just and then general garbage, etc. We could go on forever. The list is this long.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's pretty good to know, actually, just for people in general that are walking through. If you do find that there is damage to the unit or damage from pets, whatever, what would you do in that case?
So it's a conversation. I mean, generally all of our stuff is pretty new. If it's a dog and it's in one area, you'd at least have a conversation, acknowledge that that this is going on. You could, depending on how extensive it is, we have told them, okay, we need you to fix that by an ex-contractor, and they have had to do that. What we'll generally do is you go through, you get a general list of, okay, here's some things that are reasonable. Here's things that need to be repaired. So we'll just send one of our guys in right after an biannual inspection and fix XXXX.
Right.
And then there's lots of stuff that is just wear and tear and it's paint. And it's been 3 years and you haven't painted it yet. When they move out, you'll paint it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's go into the next section, which is the random 5. So I'm going to ask you 5 random questions, and you just tell me what the first thing that comes to mind.
Cool.
All right, the first one is, how do you celebrate victories?
Yeah, actually, so I was going to talk about this on like a video the other day so we used to do this all the time. So Kristy and I, when we started buying houses, it wasn't as often as now. So, we'd buy nice bottles of wine. For an example. So I wasn't a wine connoisseur until maybe like year 2. So that a nice bottle of wine would be $20, right? So, and then it was more about milestones. So we did the wine for a little while. And then we said, okay, when we hit property 50, we'll do X. So property 50, we threw a big party for all of our staff. And took them all out for dinner, had some cocktails, etc. Tell them how thankful we are because obviously we couldn't do it without them. We do travel a fair bit. So, like I said, in 2018, we traveled 6 months. We bought a boat down in Florida to cruise around the Bahamas. So in our mind, that was a celebration. Like even though business is working, we're still working our butt off. We were able to still do that, right? So that's a big celebration. So we'll have another one coming up here at 100. So there's some plans in the works.
That's got to be a big one.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Well, if you went 6 months last time, I can only imagine how big this celebration will be.
Yeah, you know what? But yeah. So that's
okay.
Celebrating, I think, is important.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is a really random question, but you got to work with me on it. You've been given an elephant and you can't get rid of it. What would you do with it?
I would probably rent it out for rides. What else are you going to do with an elephant? Maybe sell the poop to a farmer. How else can you make money out of it with an elephant?
Yeah, always thinking about how to make money, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, that is a cool answer. What makes someone a hero?
What makes somebody a hero? Oh, what makes somebody a hero? That's a good question. I'm not a great deep question answer. But I'm going to give it an attempt here. What makes somebody a hero? Honestly, I like people say like Superman, all that stuff. I never watched TV in my life, so that whole superhero thing is kind of out of question.
Yeah.
But somebody that, to me, it's somebody that has done what I want to do. Like, I'd say this with caution, but just for an example, like say the Grant Cardone, like doing something like that's extraordinary. and and the amount of people that he's helping along the way. I mean, he's got his personality, which some people don't like it, but I do.
Yeah.
But like to me, that is like that ideal, like just doing something so amazing and looking up to having that figure. I guess is one aspect. But then also like when you look back at how amazing our life has been here, and we just had November 11th, Remembrance Day. Like those people are superheroes in my mind, right? So
right, okay, that was a good answer as well. What quality do you value most in a person?
Integrity, and I think that's the biggest thing is just doing what you say you're going to do, right? That's huge. I'm a pretty honest guy, and if I'm going to do something, I'm going to, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it as best as I can.
Yeah.
So I like that. I really value, just that open honesty and doing what you say you're going to do.
And it makes sense that you value a quality that you possess, because obviously somebody has bothered you at some point, I'm assuming, and you thought, I don't want to be like that. Or maybe you've done that in the past where you didn't keep to your word, and then you just decide to make a change, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then the last question is, what success principle do you live by?
What success principle? Okay. So what is a success principle? Give me a little help here. Sorry.
What is a success principle? That's a good question in itself. So a success principle would be maybe something that something that someone told you that changed your mindset, or that just made you completely shift from one perspective to another.
Okay, so success principle. Could it be something like this? I'm struggling with this one, but I'm gonna go with this. I'm gonna talk about.
How about this? Let's make this a little easier.
Thank you.
What is one thing that you think has led to your success? The biggest thing.
The biggest thing that's led to my success.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you right now, nothing was given to me. And we go back. I think I talked a little bit about this. Just that fear of not being good enough, right, has really pushed me to being who I am. Like my personality, some people like me, some people don't. Or some people have a hard time tolerating me.
Why wouldn't people?
I don't know. Just sometimes I can be honest, and I'm just go. I don't know. But anyway, so it's kind of like just that fear of not knowing what's around the corner pushes you to make sure to try to make sure that outcome around the corner is good and that it's in your favor. That fear of maybe your bank account running out of money in 6 months, or the fear of the market changing slightly, and like just a little bit of fear. It's not like true fear, but it's angst or anxiety is really what's pushed me to always wanting to do whatever you're doing really well and try to hit it out of the park. So I think that's honestly what's kept me going, and that's what makes me always wanted to do something different and push it a little bit further. And then obviously having goals, I think, is another huge aspect of this. Mindset and goals is, without that, you're not going anywhere, in my opinion, right? And I think we always underestimate what we're able to do. I know when I look back, since in our real estate portfolio or our real estate career here, we've always overachieved our goals. So our original goal was to do 12 ever total, right? And look where we are now. Our next yearly goal was to do maybe 15 or 12 that year, and we did 20. So I think what we, pushing yourself and making your goals bigger than what you think is realistic is a large part of being really successful.
Cool. Yeah, you're also not the first person that I hear say that fear drives them. Like that seems to be pretty common, so it's interesting to hear that. Okay, so before we end things today, do you want to share what services you provide and also how people can contact you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yes. So services we provide, we do joint venture partnerships with, tons of people, obviously in Barrie, Collingwood, Midland, and really it's where we invest. We buy single family homes to convert them to duplexes, triplexes, buy 10, 15 unit buildings, etc. We also have a property management company. So if you are looking for property management company in any of those towns, anywhere up around Barrie, we can place tenants only, or we can do all the property management. We also do consulting services for people that want to create second suites. And last but not least, and the most exciting part, because we're able to really give back valuable, would be the training course. So for that one, it is learnwithbk.com.
Right.
And then my personal email is brady@bkrei.ca. And my cell number, you can call me, 705-795-1140.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing all that today. I hope that the people listening can pick up something, because we covered a lot of different things. So maybe just one thing, take home and do something with it. So again, thanks for making the trip, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Oh, thanks a lot, George.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed the content. And as a valued listener, I'm giving away a sample letter of intent. This letter is used once your potential co-venturer expresses interest in working with you. It outlines the general structure of the deal and intentions of both parties. You could visit www.welloff.ca/letter to receive your free copy. www.welloff.ca/letter.